Hi everyone. Just going to wait for until about 1 minute past and then we'll get started, but it's great to see you all. Perfect. Thanks for joining. And yeah, it's great to see so many of you joining this morning. Thank you so much. We're just going to wait 30 more seconds and then we'll get started. I can see quite a few of you coming into the waiting room still, so that's great. Hi everyone, massive welcome. Huge thank you for joining our new webinar series, which is called Future Proofed from Classroom to Career. Today's discussion focuses on what does meaningful work experience look like in a changing world. So we'll draw on Uptree's 10 years of experience and insights from various experts in this space who we're joined by today to redefine work experience and early careers exposure. So why does this conversation matter? Only 44% of young people complete work experience in school, but also at the same time, the UK's government's new policy outlined in the Youth Guarantee White Paper aims to provide every school and college with 2 weeks of work experience, which is 50 hours. So we're going to be asking the questions, how can we make that a reality? There's obviously existing experiences that are often observational or perhaps more virtual rather than hands-on. So how can we ensure that these are really meaningful? And then also with hybrid work, AI, and the changing labour market, there's new skills, new models which are essential, but how can we implement these to make it all fit for purpose? So it's great to be here today, and I think I know some of you, but for some of you that I don't know, a really quick introduction to myself, as well as some data insights from our recent work experience activity that we've been doing in 2025. So yeah, my name is Tamsin. I'm the founder and chair at Uptree. And before founding Uptree, I was a teacher. I taught geography in secondary school, and A-level geography and GCSE and all of that. And I guess I saw for 6 years of doing that, I saw firsthand the lack of equal access to meaningful work experience for the students that I was teaching, and particularly in the schools that I was working in, where the majority of students were from low-income backgrounds and communities. They were super talented, getting great academic grades all the way out, throughout my teaching career that I saw. But my students faced barriers due to under-resourced schools and limited up-to-date careers information. And ultimately, it was access to work experience that I saw that would really make a difference. So I founded Uptree, as many of you know, but 10 years ago now. And our whole mission is to enable employers to provide unique experiences of work that demystify careers and really support students in that transition from education to employment. So through our online platform and work experience events, we're connecting students across the UK. We've got reaching over 300,000 post-16 students across our 780 partnered secondary schools, with a real focus on those schools that are in higher deprivation and low-income communities, supporting those students that really need access the most. And we facilitate about 4,000 work experience placements annually for over 40 global employers. And we've also recently launched work experience for 14 to 16-year-olds, in addition to the 16 to 18-year-old works that we've been doing for sort of 10 years, which is really exciting. So just to give you a bit of an example of some of our data, so far in 2025, Uptree have processed 42,469 applications for experiences of work, which is then been secured in terms of students getting 3,749 that have participated in a work experience event. So it's really showing us that there's a high demand for work experience amongst our student networks, but there's not always enough opportunities or not always enough availability, and it underscores that necessity for an increased opportunities for our students. So in line with our mission, we're really committed to working with employers to create more experiences of work in partnership to really match that growing demand from schools, from students, but also in line with the government agenda, so that we can move from 44% of students completing work experience before they leave school to all students having that opportunity to complete work experience. And we really feel like we can get there. There's lots of employers out there doing great things already, And yeah, so really sort of supporting with that. And our team, they support employers with the kind of reaching, engaging and targeted groups of students. So that's the kind of work that we do. We focus on those from low income backgrounds, ultimately saving employers that sort of time on applications and filtering and matching, as well as admin around organising placements. So just to kind of give you that background into our work. And then just quickly, some of the demographics of the attendees to give you a bit of a breakdown of that as well. Our outreach efforts sort of target schools and students, as I say, who are most likely to kind of face those barriers in their transition from education to employment. So for our 2025 placements, we confirmed attendees from the following kind of backgrounds. So 55% female, 42% eligible for free school meals, 62%, this is just in 2025, but we're first generation university students, and 78% from minoritized ethnicity backgrounds. And that's something that's kind of run true to us from day one, sort of 10 years ago. We're constantly sort of ensuring that we're reaching the most diverse group of students that we can and building better representation for the employers that we work with. And the percentage of attendees at our work experience are more than kind of national averages, as you'll be able to see. So particularly in the areas of free school meals eligibility, which is double the national rate, and minoritized ethnicities, which in our case is 4 times the national average. That's our work experience. So just quickly in terms of impact, in 2025, 100% of Uptree event attendees found the events valuable for understanding career pathways, which is obviously core to why we exist. But some other key findings include 52% plan to pursue apprenticeships. So really interesting. This has actually grown over the course of our sort of life, Uptree life. And 92% want to experience more work experience with the employers that they've met. So they're really looking for that tangible next step. And this is where apprenticeships or other sort of skills building insights and work can be really helpful to kind of build a bit of a plan. So it's not just a singular work experience placement, it's really part of a kind of bigger strategy that leads into sort of permanent employment ultimately, if that's right for the young person and they want to choose that career. 94% feel encouraged to be ambitious in their career pursuits following a work experience placement. So really raising the sort of aspirations and motivations for young people. And we feel like work experience really can drive that, which is really important. And we noticed that there was a 121 increase in attendees viewing employers as attractive post-event. I think for a lot of our employers, there's a social impact drive to why they run work experience. There's loads of other reasons as well, though, like reputation. So it's really interesting getting that kind of data. But overall, really, these experiences enhance student confidence, knowledge, and future decision making, while benefiting sort of the improved brand recognition, and then also, as you know, your improved sort of future pipeline for talent. So yeah, thank you for listening to just quick intros and data from Uptree. I'm really excited just to get into the kind of core part of this webinar, which is getting to meet our speakers, which we're going to do now. So I'm going to hand over to our first speaker. And I'd really like you to meet Keanu. Keanu is a software engineer degree apprentice at Arm in Sheffield, and is just going to share a bit more about his journey, and then we're going to go into the panel after that. Thanks, Keanu.
Thanks, Tamsin. Yeah, hello, folks. Yeah, I'm Keanu, and thought I'd just talk a bit about my story of Uptree and how it got me to where I am today. So it started all the way back when I started at my state school, sixth form, Liverpool, around like 3 years ago, when a bunch of folks from Uptree came in and talked about the existence of their platform, how you can get work experience opportunities. And as someone who was interested in tech, I knew that as soon as I saw that they had work experience for Arm, which was a tech company listed, I knew that I wanted to go to that. So I got the train to the Manchester office for a day with a bunch of my friends from sixth form to go and see what the Arm office was like. I mean, honestly, my expectations were that, as a corporate office, everyone must be like wearing suits and tie. All the employees must be like really locked in and, dead serious. But in reality, when I got there, everything was really chill. All the engineers were walking around in really casual clothing. They were really down to earth. And I remember there was a really interesting microbit task that we were doing that, it was just something to do with coding, something technology, something that I really enjoyed. And what I came away with from that was that, again, I was really interested in technology. I quite love experience of it, but the opportunity to actually like directly observe the culture, the working environment, and the projects that a company like Arm works on really inspired me. And it just lit a flame in my head that led me to kind of keep tabs on them later down the line when I was later applying for union apprenticeships. Yeah, so my expectations are definitely met. They were even subverted. And then I did a few work experiences with Uptree. So after that, I did some work experience with a government agency for a day to do with cybersecurity. Again, I really just enjoyed being able to go into their office, be able to talk to the employees there, and just like talk with them about what they got up to. And we did some like role play tasks, some like fictional scenario. I mean, I would have loved if it was a bit more realistic, but for obvious reasons, they can't because they can't to say everything for national security reasons. Um, and then after my work experience, after that work experience, I went to Uptree's Futures Up Careers Festival. It was at PwC's office in Manchester, from what I remember, and there was just a wide range of employees there. So everyone had a stand, and you could talk with employers such as Norton Rose Fulbright or government agencies, things like that. And there were also mock assessment centers and other info sessions, which later down the line actually really helped when I applied for apprenticeships. Um, then after Futures Up, I applied to do some tech work experience with an investment bank. And initially, I wasn't able to go to their 1 day experience as the train costs for me to the London HQ were a bit too high, given my low income background. But later on, Uptree still invited me to apply to a summer school they were hosting. And I was surprised I was actually still able to apply, even though I was unable to go. But they made an exception for me, which I was really grateful for. And again, I was offered a place there. I traveled down for the summer. I stayed in a hotel in London for a whole week, and it was a bit of a big expense, which was initially challenging. But after some conversation with the employer, they were able to support me and stay down there for the week-long summer school, which again I was really grateful for, and especially because it was an experience that I still look back very fondly on. Like that for that 1 week in year 12, I made some lifelong friends that I still keep in touch with to this day, and was just not only able to really get to grips with the culture and what it's like to work in this investment bank, but also just to experience London to the full, and just to actually talk to the engineers working there. And we even did some, coding and like finance related like activities that I and all the others at the summer school really enjoyed. And finally, my last ever experience with Uptree before got to where I'm now was in April of year 13. At the time, I was knee deep in applying to uni apprenticeships, also balancing A-level exam prep. And it was during this time that I had a final interview scheduled with some engineers in Arm Sheffield office. And at the time, I thought, maybe Uptree will have a work experience listed in Sheffield. And miraculously, they did. It was scheduled to take place 2 days before my interview. However, it was actually filled up. There weren't any spots left, and I remember calling Uptree and being like, "Can you like get me a spot on this? Because I've got an interview coming up, and it really help." And thankfully, they did, and I was able to visit the Arb Sheffield office for a day with the Uptree work experience. It was similar, but also somewhat different in structure than Manchester Day. But more importantly for me, I not only again made more lifelong friends who I still keep in touch with, but I was able to speak with colleagues in the Sheffield office. And I think I personally I have a strong feeling that when I mentioned that I'd gone to this work experience in my interview 2 days after, it probably showed some unparalleled level of interest, which again led me to get the apprenticeship offer from Arm, which is where I am now. And yeah, that was my story of Uptree. And even now, I've actually come full circle. I think I've helped organize and do workshops at two Uptree work experience days at Arm's office in Sheffield, now as an employee. So yeah, thank you all. That was my story.
Thanks, Keanu. I'm really excited to have you on the panel as well because I feel like I have loads of follow-up questions. But it's really lovely to hear your story firsthand. And I know I've seen like you do loads with Uptree, which has been great. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's really like lovely to hear. So we are going to move on to the panel now, which I know a lot of you are really keen to hear more from. We've got some amazing panelists with us, so thank you all for joining. We have some set questions, but please add questions that you have to the Q&A function. We really want to hear from you, the audience, and we'll get to those following. So just to begin with, please could each of our panelists start by introducing yourself, and if you could share the perspective that you have on our kind of overarching question, which is, what does meaningful work experience mean to you? Because I think all of you will have slightly different perceptions, and it'll be really interesting. So let's start with, I'm just going to let go from my screen, Tiana.
Thanks, Tamsin. Hi, everybody. Lovely to meet you. My name's Tiana, and I'm an early talent acquisition specialist at Clifford Chance. I've worked in the early talent space for just over a decade now, so really well versed in creating and developing work experience programs for a variety of different employers. At the moment, my core role is predominantly focused on supporting early talent into our organisation, whether that's on a work experience programme or graduates. And our main kind of early talent programme is our Access programme, which supports Year 12 students from low socioeconomic backgrounds join us for a 2-year programme, which is all about developing their personal and professional skills to hopefully enable them to be a part of our early talent workforce in the future. In terms of that kind of key question around what that should look like, I think when we're looking at work experience and how to make it meaningful, some of the most important things are really about making sure that from an employer's perspective, you're focusing on understanding how to embed it into your core values and your core business objectives. Because I think once you start to understand how it pipelines into the needs of the organization, that helps it to be something that's longer term and sustainable for the organization. So if you think about things like, how can this support the organization to build their early talent pipeline? Or if you're not doing it from that point of view, thinking about your CSR objectives and how, for example, in the future that might help you with tendering and going out for business, and having really clear set objectives around why you're doing it, that will help it to become really sustainable. I think also having really clear measurable goals so you can define what success looks like is something that will really help you longer term as well. I think it's something that's always come to the forefront of any decision making for work experience programs, which I've managed, because I think that helps to kind of sell it into senior stakeholders and they can see some of the core benefits of, meaningful work experience. And that kind of feeds into making sure that you've got, those structured programs with really clear sponsors of the program, and ultimately having that clear structure around it supports the young people that you're trying to support longer term.
Thanks, Tiana. That's super interesting and helpful. Really love that around values and sustainability. Erica, what do you think?
Great, thanks. I'm really excited to be here today, and so much of what you just said, Diana, really echoed with me. So I'm Erica Chamberlain, and I head up the Strategic Business Partnership team at the Careers and Enterprise Company. And if you haven't heard of us, we're the national body for careers education in England, and we support schools, colleges, and employers to deliver modern careers education. And our mission is to help every young person find their best next step. We work across the whole of England, and we have a place-based careers hubs that work across England that support 93% of schools and colleges. So we've got that large reach and kind of can talk from that system perspective. But when I think about the question, what does meaningful work experience mean to me at Careers and Enterprise Company? I think really we need to think about meaningful work experience should be supporting the development of knowledge, skills and behaviours for young people that they're going to need when they go into the workplace, and really giving them the agency to understand what they've learned and the skills that they've gained. Now, the Gatsby benchmarks, if you haven't heard of them, are a renowned framework of 8 benchmarks, and they define world-class careers provision. Now, they've recently been updated to include a clear definition of what makes experiences meaningful, and I think that's a really good place to start. So obviously experiences can vary in intensity, from short group workplace visits to extended industry placements, but the core principles for making them meaningful really remain the same. And I think you need to establish purpose, so you need to have clear aims and learning outcomes, and they'll be different depending on those business needs and different depending on what the young person needs. They need to be targeted, so that's really understanding the needs of the young people you're engaging with and really making sure you can tailor it to their needs. You need to be able to showcase diversity, and I think sort of hearing you speak, Keanu, about kind of some of the things that you've had, like making sure you get a real chance to really meet a diverse range of employees, and making sure that there's some relatable role models there for the young people who are coming in. And then making it engaging. You talked about you'd like it more real. I think sometimes at work we can't offer real work to young people who are coming in. We might not be able to do it for security reasons, or it might not be age appropriate, but really having those experiences based on the work of the business. So that might be a project, it might be something, but it's on real world scenarios that you're battling with as a business, so they can understand the industry and the type of projects that might be addressed in that workplace. And then I think we must never forget that we need to provide and gain feedback. So if it's going to be meaningful, you need to make sure that you're feeding back to the young person on their part. They can understand where they can make improvements, what skills they've learned, but also we get their feedback and the teacher's feedback and also your employees. And then I guess the last point to really make it meaningful is considering pre and post work. If a young person's coming on an experience, they need to be prepared so that they can make the most of that experience. And then when they finish that experience, I think it's really important for them to be able to reflect on it and to understand where they're going next.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Really thorough answer, which is great. And I love all the different points. And we're going to deep dive into some of those in, as we go through this discussion, which will be really, really helpful. Ben, it's great to see you.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Good. So my name's Ben Seal and I'm a head teacher of Stepney All Saints School. We're based in Tower Hamlets. We're a large secondary school, 1,500. We have the largest sixth form in Tower Hamlets in a school. And it's interesting, really interesting, and really pleased to be here and listening and to all the colleagues here that are on the webinar. And you can see there's a clear golden thread running all the way through from Uptree, through the careers advice, through schools and through employers, that we want to give the young people experience. For us as a school, I think it funnels down. I think it sort of like the first thing we're looking at is that connection of subjects to real life about work experience. It's about bringing English, bringing science, bringing maths, bringing ICT to life, because we do it in school, we do it in the classroom. They need to see it working. Then we're talking about sort of like building those essential life skills, being able to go and work in spaces. And maybe later on in the talk, I've sort of like, we need to sort of like press the button that is the uncomfortable button, where when we talk about low social economic backgrounds, and we talk about, and you see from Uptree's statistics, those demographics around race and so on, those are the buttons we need to press as well, where we're building life skills, but we've got to debunk sort of like some of the myths around some of the students, that they don't actually know how to interact. If I was given a coin every time for when people come into my school and say, your kids are sparky, they're really interesting and they can hold conversation, these kids can do exactly the same things. And those are things that work experience helps debunk in those employers. Informed career choices as well. One of the things that we need to do within school is work with career services, is give them as many experiences as possible. But as everybody knows, we've all been through school. It on a piece of paper is very different from actually going out and experiencing it and being in those spaces. Social mobility. Tower Hamlets is mostly one of the most deprived areas in England when it comes per capita. However, we've mostly got one of the best set of schools in the UK. And we, from 3,000 students in Tower Hamlets taking GCSEs, over half of them, 52% of them, got a grade 9 to 5. And that's the same grade 9 to 5 across the country. And that's some of the things that the myth that we've got to break down, that we've not got the talent pool. Remember, Tower Hamlets is on the border of the city and Canary Wharf, and we've got all this talent here, and that's really what we need to be throwing forward to employers. And then obviously for the individuals, about strengthening applications to both apprenticeships, which is the fastest growing market at the moment in education, is apprenticeships. And students are electing to apply for those apprenticeships. And then there's statistics around apprenticeships being more difficult to get into than getting into Oxford and Cambridge now. And so those are the types of things that we're trying to break down and give the student experience from an educational point of view.
Thanks, Ben. That's super helpful and really interesting as well. And congratulations on such a successful school academically as well. It's really great to hear that. Keanu, over to you.
Yeah, well, hello again, folks. Yep, I'm Keanu, and I've already talked a bit, but Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on, I guess, meaningful work experience. I mean, having done, you know, everything from the 1 day Uptree work experiences to week-long summer schools, I think that there is definitely like some sort of balance to be had in that. Now that I work for an employer and have random work experiences, I know what it's like to organize them and things, and there is definitely a balance you have to strike where, practically, it's not feasible to just like keep organizing a load of ad hoc work experiences. But equally, there's also still some benefit to having some sort of structured program, I think. I mean, I clearly remember enjoying like the week-long summer school programs, especially. So, um, yeah. What else? Yeah, I've not got any other thoughts right now, but yeah. Anyway.
Thanks, Kino, though. It's really helpful to hear, and it's really great to see, and from an employer's perspective, that we are, time is all, like it's always the pressure, it's always difficult, and from an education perspective, you want your students to have as much exposure as possible. So there is definitely a balance to be made in the middle. And totally agree. Tiana, should we be moving away from ad hoc work experience into more tangible next steps for young people that link career to progression?
Yeah, I think in most of the roles that I've worked in, I've been brought in to define a structured work experience program which steers away from those ad hoc placements, which typically were filled by senior leaders who had relatives, and they would typically bring in a relative to come in for ad hoc work experience. And by having much more structured programs, you're able to support people from a variety of different backgrounds, and do it in a really fair, transparent way. When you think about creating a structured work experience program, what you're absolutely then able to do is think about all of the core skills that a young person needs, and you're able to structure it across whether it's a day, a week, or a much longer placement that you're able to have with them, to make sure that they're able to take those key learnings away and understand how they can embed them into future work experience placements. Typically, one of the things that we find to be most useful is giving people the opportunity to have that kind of pre-placement learning. So before they join you, you can give them some tasks that they can go away and think about. It builds up their confidence before they come in on day one. They know a little bit more about your organization. They know about what they need to do on day one. So they're geared up to kind of come and bring their very best version of themselves. The first couple of days, you then maybe are further developing that confidence and some of those softer skills. And when we think about those softer skills, it's really important to develop that on day one, because they often have it. But again, it's about bringing out that confidence in them to be able to have the confidence to communicate effectively and understand how to um, talk to maybe older people that they're not used to doing as much. And then in those last few days, if it's only a week placement, this is where you're really able to kind of pull out those skills which they already have, which they might have learned through their studies or their extracurricular activities, but you're really, really focusing on helping them to understand what that looks like in practice by giving them core tasks which will really highlight those skills. And then at the end of the placement, that's where you really start to hone in and allow them to reflect on their placement, and even do tasks like maybe structuring their CV so that they can really clearly and effectively show how they've used those skills throughout the entirety of their placement to a future employer. I think taking a step back and reflecting on what meaningful work experience is and what we want it to achieve. It's about supporting the employer to be able to hopefully build a talent pipeline for the future, and raise that employer brand. But ultimately, we do want a group of young people who are much more confident in their skills and their abilities, and they can go into the workplace or even into their next interview being able to confidently talk about their skills and how they've used them previously. When you think about those competency-based interviews, that's all that we're looking for. And actually, we have a duty to make sure they're able to do that. So having structured work experience will really enable those young people to do that in the future. And you may see them coming back to you and actually being able to do that in a really clear and concise way. So I definitely think stepping away from ad hoc as much as possible, although if ad hoc is all you're able to offer at the moment, absolutely continue to do that, because young people definitely still need work experience that will support them in the future.
Super helpful, and like, so building that into some kind of structure where there's like a beginning, a middle, like an end, or leading into something. There's some other, it's part of a wider strategy. Ben, what do you think in terms of, from a teaching perspective, in terms of making it meaningful, you know, before, during, after, and like, do you feel like a lot of your students are interested in apprenticeship? Should it link into talent teams? And yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's very, very important. I think even if you might be substitute the name work experience for career ready, then you're actually then focusing in and zooming in on careers, and you're zooming in on actual subjects and interests of the students. I think it needs to be very focused. If we're if we look at the wider picture of what is needed in industry, and we always sort of like hear as we go through every year that industry wants X from the school children that are coming out. They want this type of child coming out. They want this child, and then we always get told that they're not being developed. And so it absolutely essential that the work experience is focused. That is not just work experience, i.e. going in, maybe working in the photocopying room and tidying up a cupboard and so on and so forth, but it is some form of exposure. I think Keanu hit the nail on the head where we're talking about going into those spaces, getting some kind of exposure. Yes, they're not going to be doing that, the real work, but they're going to be getting exposure to that. And then also from there, then employees can really target the type of students they may need or want in the future. So yeah, I from a school perspective, yes, we have that challenge of getting 200 kids out into the workspace, which is very difficult because, like I just said, that's in Tower Hamlets, that'll be 3,000 kids trying to get work experience. Couple that with all the other boroughs in London, it's a lot of children trying to get out to work experience if you're going at the A16 level. However, it being targeted, it being meaningful, is much more impactful for them going forward.
Yeah, it's a good point, isn't it, about the kind of lack of supply, I guess, where there's a huge amount of demand. Erica, what do you think from an employer's perspective? Like, how can employers with limited resources or time make this more of a reality if they're not offering kind of open access work placements at the moment? What could they do to sort of shift? What's the sort of first step solution?
I think I really come back to what Tiana said, which is to understand why you're doing it. So really linking it back to that business need and imperative, and that will be many and varied. It could be exactly that for social value. It could be for talent pipeline. It could be because you want to be supporting the communities which are on your doorstep. It could be for many different reasons that you're engaging. I think getting that senior leader buy-in, so it's sustainable, because then it's going to be that ongoing program, and it won't just be something that comes and goes when you leave the business. So I think that's really important, but also understanding that as work experience is modernizing and it is moving away from that kind of 2-week block, which can still be very valuable if it's meaningful, and for the right young person, but actually there's many ways you can deliver it. And again, Ben, you made some really good points about it being linked to the curriculum. And so that could be that you've got a group of young people who are coming out to find out something for a day that is about something linked to their geography curriculum, and that can be really valuable because they're finding out about the careers and the industries and the types of projects that are linked into their curriculum. So again, I think it's about thinking about what you can offer and whatever capacity. Again, so what you said, Tiana, of kind of, don't stop. If you can only offer a small part, offer that, start there, make sure it links to your business need, and you can build from there. So I think that's really important, that you don't let the sort of perfection stop where you start, that you do one small step and you can build from there. And it doesn't always have to be an industry placement, a block. Those are great, they've got really purposeful, but it could be having a group of young people who are in year 7 linked to their curriculum for half a day.
That's a really good point, isn't it, about going younger? And I've got a question about that in a minute. Keanu?
Yep, I just wanted to jump in, and because I was just reflecting on what Tiana was talking about earlier about moving away from ad hoc to structured programs, and one key point she brought up that is a bit of a bugbear of mine is how with structured programs, at least for the ones I apply for, etc., at least like through Uptree, because of my low socioeconomic background, the fact that I applied for it and that I got the place, it felt like a more meritocratic way for more young people to get work. It feels like a more meritocratic way for more young people to get work experience, because again, I've quite a few friends. I've a few friends who know certain people, and through one way or another they were just able to get some internship or some work experience at their dad's friend's company. And as someone who, again, my parents moved all the way from Hungary like 20 years ago, knew no one. I had to kind of start from scratch essentially. So have just seen other young people have who are more lucky be able to get those opportunities, but have, compared to people like me who aren't as easily able to get those opportunities, is why I think it's really important that employers make sure that you don't just have ad hoc work experience placements that in reality are just the relatives of senior leaders coming in, but rather, again, having a more diverse array of young people from like free school meals or from minority and ethnic backgrounds, etc. So yeah, that was just one point I really wanted to jump in on.
I totally agree. And, that traditional model of work experience is kind of becoming less and less relevant today. And making sure, that if you are continuing to do it, you're balancing it out through other structured programs, so that it is more equal. But even so, it can make things worse. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that. How should work experience evolve for hybrid teams? Obviously, we're talking about a changing world, AI-driven workflows, emerging careers. Should we be changing the way that we're communicating about work experience or the type of work experience that we're offering, given AI and things like that? I'm going to open that up for anyone. How about you? Yeah, Erica, great. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just happy to come in there. I guess for me, what's really important, and I guess this is what we're talking about at the Careers Enterprise Company, is thinking really carefully about the learning outcomes and objectives. And we've got a new framework called EqualX, which is really looking at that from kind of really young and building from kind of year 7 all the way through. And I think it's really important in this really fast changing world of work, and with AI coming in, that the skills that are really important are those essential skills. So we have got to think about embedding communication, listening and speaking, creative problem solving, self-management, making sure that young people can be adapting, planning, they can show that leadership and teamwork and collaboration. And I think it's really important that they're doing that from a very young age, and that they're going through. And I guess when you're thinking from an employer's point of view, they may not always be in the office, they may be working in hybrid teams, they may be working in very different ways. And I think that if you move to a more flexible model, then that may mean that they get set a project and they do some of that. And then they go in to visit the workplace, maybe for half a day or a day, or it may be that you get something that is fully virtual. For example, with some industries, so the tech sector, that may be the majority of how they work. So it may be a really representative model where you do something that is virtual. I think it's still really important for young people to go into workplaces because they need that experience. But I think there is the flexibility to be able to do really meaningful work in different ways, as long as you are supporting them to build that knowledge, skills and behaviour. And that's the really important part. In whichever way it is delivered, it has to be really meaningful.
That's super helpful. And I think more and more we're thinking about how to measure the outcomes of work placement. So do you, or Tiana or Ben, and Keanu as well, do you have any ideas for employers and for schools that are looking to kind of measure outcomes? What are the things, specific things that they should be measuring to see, has this placement been a success?
I'm happy to jump in here. So at Clifford Chance, when we're looking at how we measure outcomes and whether our programs have been successful, one of the things that's most important for us is that because it's a 2-year program, at every single intervention that we have with the young people, we measure their experience. So we have a very long list of skills which we would typically hire our trainees to, and we use those throughout our 2-year development program because we ultimately are building them up to be a successful trainee in the future. So we will kind of test their readiness of those particular skills at the beginning of their program, and at the end of every intervention we ask them to rate how much that particular workshop or intervention has built up or developed those skills. That helps us to understand whether their individual skills are developing, and also whether the intervention that we've put in place is fit for purpose, so we can constantly develop the program. The other thing that we're really keen on doing, and we've recently introduced this, is actually destination tracking. So seeing where the participants on our programs actually end up. So we're very mindful that every year we take on approximately 50 students who we would love to in the future become our future talent. But we're very mindful that actually at various different points we have students drop off, and that might be because whilst the program is really useful, they understand and they realise that the program is not necessarily going to help them to get into the career that they want to. So they wanted to find out more about the legal profession, but actually by interacting with one of our clients, they now want to go down a particularly different route. So they might decide to do that. What we like to do is that every single time that we have somebody drop off, we understand exactly where they're going. And 2 or 3 years down the line, we like to understand, have they gone onto a future scheme of ours? Have they actually ended up being offered a training contract with us? And actually, if they haven't, where have they landed? Have they gone off to a client, or have they gone into a different profession? For us, the most important thing is that we know that they've not ended up being neat, because we want to make sure that we're supporting them to go on to further education or employment or training in the future. So I think thinking about it from an internal perspective, have they joined us? And then externally, have we supported them to continue to be successful in a career or go on to further training later on down the line?
That. I think destination tracking is a really great way of doing it, and yeah, really great to hear about the kind of rating system that you've got as well. Does anyone else have any other ways of what they're measuring? And Ben, do you?
If I were to come first, I mean, the panels had said it all really. I mean, that's destinations is how we track in schools. We look at where our kids land. And one of the things that we are looking to introduce is after graduation as well. Because remember, I stop at A level, the kids go off to university. But what we're seeing increasingly is students coming back and saying, can we get some help? Because we're still looking for those experiences. We're still looking to break through those glass ceilings. And so we're looking at a program that's sort of like trying to help them after graduation and to get into those spaces. But destination is the big measure for us. UCAS applications is a big measure, where what type of degrees they go into is always something that we look at as well. Coming on back onto the question on AI. I mean, rather, I won't even pretend to try and get into the fact of how AI works, and you know, I do use it, but you know, in training them for that future of AI. And I think if I remember back, we the government was pushing out a video that we used to show to students back in 2010 about how the workforce was going to change. So it's kind of like something that was on the horizon. But AI, as Erica has said, can be a facilitator. And I think there was sort of like a question in there about in the Q&A about developing long-term support. And I think I think you've said that as well, breaking that traditional model of work experience. And that's why I sort of like maybe changing the name, because I remember work experience, and actually my work experience was quite good. I went to BT. I went to the head office of BT, and I was in there, and I was sorry, you youngsters won't know, but I was basically taking the memos around to everybody because there weren't emails back then. I was taking memos to different desks and so on and so forth, but I felt part of the team. But I think that facilitation now is about facilitating through an AI platform, is about giving virtual experiences. I know Tiana spoke when we spoke before about online courses that they can complete. And it doesn't all have to be in 1 week. I remember, and that's where that demand element maybe can be spread out, that work experience doesn't have to be 1 full week of work experience. It could be a program over half term of 1 day a week or half a day a week, an afternoon that we bring, say, we get the minibus, we bring 10 kids down and they get an experience within a work setting. I think if we're going to look at capacity, we're going to have to be a bit ingenious on how we tackle it.
Thanks, Ben. That's super helpful. And we talked a bit earlier about starting early, and then I'll probably one or two more questions. I'm going to move on to the Q&A. But how early are we talking about? And from an employer's perspective, particularly if it's sort of a talent team, they're probably thinking, 16 to 18 target. But should we be going younger? 14 to 16 or even younger? And should those types of modern work experience, if they're one day or taster sessions or longer placements, whatever it is, should they be different for the younger students versus the older students? So I'm thinking, 14 to 16 versus 16 to 18. How should they differ? And are you doing that? Anyone?
I'm happy to come in there just from a kind of from a national perspective, as early as possible. Stereotypes get formed at about age 6, 7. If you want to think about your industry and whether or not young people are going to come, closed doors, and I'm not talking about occupations here, obviously, at that age, but I'm talking about different sectors. So you might think about, young girls who might be closing off STEM subjects at that stage. We've really got to think about, and that is real inspiration at that point. It's seeing yourself, the relatable role models. It's making sure that you have that, and you have that if you don't have it in your networks. But we have to be starting experiences of work at year 7 after that, and it should be there, but it needs to be really structured from year 7, and that's definitely what we're doing at Careers Enterprise Company. We're looking at a set of learning objectives and outcomes from year 7 and how you can embed it in, and that is different if you're in year 7 to 9 than how it might be if you're in years 10, 11, 12, but it should be a progressive multi-year, and it should build on each other, so that when you do get those young people who'd be accessing maybe slightly longer placements when they get into year 10, definitely post 16, they're really ready for them. They've built that confidence, they've got that agency, they understand how to make the most of those opportunities, and they're going into something that is more of a specialist interest area for them at that stage. But if you don't start early, then you're not going to widen those pathways. And we started talking about social mobility and equity, and I think it's really important that that starts early, and there's a really strong case for that. So and I think as we move into modern work experience, there's enough employers and there's enough different models in those earlier years that actually it means that you should be able to find something capacity wise you can engage with, because it doesn't have to be that long block or a placement. You can actually just offer some of those shorter experiences that we were talking about, or perhaps set a project or do some of that kind of curriculum linked learning.
Thanks. Tiana?
Yeah, I think I just probably want to echo everything that Erica said. I think getting in as early as possible with students is really key and really important. And I think that's because careers are just changing rapidly at the moment. And it's really important that we give students an opportunity to understand what different careers actually look like. And I think as early as we're able to do that, it helps them to become more familiar with their different opportunities and the types of career pathways that they might be able to go into. If we just start at year 10, I think it's probably too late, as we will have some students who, depend on their background, will be having those conversations at home, and those who haven't will be completely too far behind to make sure that they're able to get into a career which they would probably want to go into. And I know that actually for employers, it becomes very hard and difficult in terms of the time that they have to be able to go in and maybe deliver in-person sessions and workshops. But I think this is where you can make use of partnerships and relationships, the likes of Uptree, to be able to do some of that work on your behalf, working with a valued partner who understands your brand and the type of work that you do. You can start to filter those messages out to students from a much younger age to support them to better understand. I know that often some of the students that we have who even are wanting to apply for the Access programme are not entirely sure of what commercial law is, but actually had they've had a few touch points at a much younger age, they'd be much more confident and understanding of exactly what that was. So I definitely think it's something that everybody should be aiming to do, even if it's very light touch. It's really important.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful, and particularly, going younger is key. And I like the idea of kind of having those different types of activity. It doesn't have to be, this long work experience placement. There's so many other ways that you can do it and embed it into school and with teacher support as well. Keanu, I can see you got a hand up, and Ben as well.
Yeah, sure. Reflecting back on Erica's comment about how she said young people from like around the age of 6 start to develop ideas. My own experience, I knew that I was really interested in tech from the age of like 7 to 8 onwards. So yeah, I agree that we should aim to go even earlier than like year 12, year 10. And even speaking from what my employer doing, there's actually someone in my organization at Arm who started a primary school outreach program. And so what we're currently doing is, well, I think a few months ago we brought a few kids from a local primary school in Cambridge on into our office campus, and we just did a day of kind of tech, coding with them essentially, and explaining, the basics of AI to them, things like that. So I think, yeah, the earlier the better, because some obviously not all kids know what they want to do. I guess comparing myself to my peers, I was kind of the exception, that I knew what I wanted to do from a really young age, and like any opportunity that I could have had to do anything tech related from that young age, I would have most definitely done. So yeah, I think I fully agree. Just making sure those opportunities are there, no matter how young the students are, even if it's like not full on, but just a day or half day session is just really important.
Brilliant. Thanks, Keanu. Ben?
Yeah, for fear of repetition, the panel really has covered it from all points of view. because
leave it
because yeah.
So Q&A is the next session. I'm going to hand over. Is that I see you got a hand up.
That's exactly it, because we've got quite a few questions to go through.
Okay, great. I can't see them. Thanks, Obi.
Yeah, no worries. There's some really, really good questions, so I'm going to put them out to the whole panel. So first one is for most students and parents carers, in-person work experience placement is the preferred option. However, there are barriers in terms of costs, transport students for insight days, geographical barriers, lack of local options or public transport links, and social barriers. There are students with social anxiety. My question is, will a virtual placement with meaningful activities be valued and hold the same weight as in-person placement for a modern work experience and from an employer's perspective?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one.
Yeah, great.
So at Clifford Chance, we have something that we call GVIs, which are global virtual internships, and they are online work experience programs which students can tap into at any time that fits them best. So typically they're 4 to 6 hours of learning, and if you had 30 minutes one day, you could log in, do some of the learning, and then do some the following week at any time that works best. Most legal law firms have them, so they're very popular across all firms, and that's because we see the value in them. We want young people to engage with them because it absolutely helps them to better understand A, the type of law that we practice, and then B, the type of task that they could be doing if they were to join us as a trainee in the future. Now, the reason it's so important is not just because it will help them to understand and give much stronger answers at interview or during their application, but we've seen consistently over the past few years that students who take our global virtual internships are 15% more likely to be successful throughout the interview process for any of our schemes. So it absolutely holds as much weight as in-person work experience opportunities. And for all of those reasons and those things that you've mentioned in terms of the barriers that some students have to uptaking in-person work experience, this is an absolutely amazing way for them to make sure that they're getting some level of work experience. And from our perspective, we have seen that as meaningful and absolutely helps them in terms of the outcomes that it can deliver. So yeah, absolutely, virtual is just as good as in person.
Great. I'm going to move on to the next question because we've got quite a lot. So, what advice do panelists have for developing longer-term support and talent pooling? How can we best support students after they've completed short-term work experience placements?
I would just say, from a kind of supporting students, mentioned earlier that kind of pre-placement work and the kind of post-placement work. I think it's really important that young people understand the skills that they're developing, what the objectives of each of those experiences that they're having, whether they are shorter term, longer term, whether they're virtual or in person, that they're understanding what they're building and what the knowledge, the skills, the pathways that they can go into. And I think that's the really important part, so that they can really link all of those different experiences together to build that agency they can have for when they go on to those next steps, whichever that next step might be. And that they're going to be multiple and varied for lots of individual students. But I think being able to build the learning and have the agency themselves to sort of really take that on board and use those skills in those application processes, I think is really important.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Next question. Would you recommend block weeks for work experience or a placement day over X amount of weeks?
From a school perspective, obviously managing it is people would do the traditional model of a block week, but actually we're looking more into a flexible model where we're interweaving it into the curriculum, and especially at sort of like Key Stage 3, where it will be things like employee visits, it'll be assemblies, it'll be career days, and it'll be question and answer, getting people in. And so when we're talking about that experience, what organizations can have, I think Erica said it before, it's very much a diversity of model where from the sixth formers, they want to be on site, they want to get real life experience, that kind of interaction, be in the space. And then as you come down, like any curriculum, if you work backwards, as you come down, it's about exposure. So I wouldn't say one model is better than the other. I think when you look at a school from year 7 to year 13, you'll be looking to use most of the models, all of the models if possible.
I'd love to build on that answer, Ben. I completely agree about it being curriculum linked. I think that's the answer to sort of making sure that it sticks and that it really makes sense for the young people. And I think that as a national body, we're really trying to move away from the idea of this is the right model and here's a tick to say that we've done this or this is the right way, and moving much more to those learning outcomes and objectives and embedding it. And so there'll be multiple different ways. And I think from the question that we had earlier about how do we support young people who maybe have anxiety or support young people who've got different needs, that journey is going to be really different for those individual young people. So some of them may move through those sort of phases and objectives much quicker than others. And so you would need to adjust the model depending. So I think it's less of a this is the right way and this is the model, and more of a how do we support those young people to get through, build those skills. And I think that'll be different for different cohorts and different through the curriculum. And I guess it's that this is a big change. I want to really acknowledge this as well as we move towards a different system. So it will take, many years to implement, but actually if you can get your senior leaders involved and you can embed it through the curriculum and start to build it as part of day-to-day practice, then I think over time you will get where you need for young people to be building those skills.
Brilliant. And then this one specifically for you, Ben, actually. So what is some advice for getting head teachers SLT on board with providing flexibility and timetable to ensure Key Stage 3 modern work experience included and meaningful?
Well, the first thing that's going to get them involved is that this is the new DfE guidance, and it's very much as America's as said before, the Gatsby benchmark will be very much outlining that work experience is 7 to 13 in secondary schools, and it's very much that there should be some exposure at Key Stage 3. Just to say the way that we do it, we use both form time, we use drop down day, we use assemblies. There's lots of vehicles to be able to do that throughout the school day without impinging on the wider curriculum. And so we look at it as an enhancement for science. We look at it an enhancement for English when we bring in authors. So a lot of it can be linked to work experience, and you may be doing that already, but we're not overtly actually identifying that this is not just an author coming in and talking about sort of like a book and how they've written that book, but talking about the career behind that, how they get to be an author, how they get to be a journalist. So when we bring people in, we try to break it open a little bit more than just, oh, this is a great book, we really like the story. It's, I'm an author. This is how you can be an author too. We look to get people that authors in that represent our student body as well. So that representation is there. So it's using all the different vehicles you have in your school day. And then as you go up the years, overtly having key times within the curriculum, it being interwoven in the curriculum. So again, if you're teaching geography and you're talking about the careers that you can have within geography, you're doing that. You're showing them that. You're bringing in professionals and showing them that this is where you can lead from this subject area. So once it's interwoven in the curriculum, those opportunities should present themselves.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I think that's it. We are only 1 minute left. So apologies for everyone who didn't get their questions in. There were some really great questions, and perhaps we might take them offline and look at how we can kind of answer them in a separate way. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's joined. So I'm Jared Ruth, Senior Business Development Manager at Uptree. I said thank you for everyone who's taken the time to join, and really thank you to our wonderful panel, Erica, Ben, Keanu, and Tiana, for your wonderful contributions today. I hope the audience have been able to take at least one thing away from today. The questions and discussions show that we're all wrestling with the same challenge: how to make work experience more meaningful in a changing world. The most impactful programs give young people ownership, real connection to purpose, and visibility of pathways. And importantly, they benefit employers not just by giving back, but by preparing future talent in a way that aligns with how work is changing. And that's where Uptree comes in. We partner with organizations to design work experience that reflects how the world of work is evolving, from outreach into schools to employer hosted experiences, in-person and virtual models, leading into apprenticeship and impact reporting. If something today resonated, let's explore how we can build or evolve your work experience programs to reflect the changing world we've discussed. Even a short conversation could spark an approach tailored to your region, social impact goals, or early career strategies. Thank you again. Thank you for your time and energy. Work experience shouldn't be introduce young people to work. It should help them shape it. So you can see on screen a QR code for our Employers Digest, which is sent out monthly. Please feel free to sign up. My number's on screen if you want to pick up this conversation, and I'll also be sending out this recording. And I'm generally looking forward to what we can build with you. So the next slide is a logo graph of our current employer partners, and yeah, just want to say thank you to our panel, and thank you for everyone who was able to make the time and join today.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Can we just say that there's still lots of questions? What we will do is certainly answer them and just come back to people. So we've made a note of the questions, and any questions that have not been answered, we'll respond. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.